Chinese karakters. Een evenement in het Tropenmuseum dat gaat over de state of the art op het gebied van kunst, muziek en allerlei zaken in China. We gaan Zhang Dai interviewen en daarna geven we iets weer van een groepsgesprek, een talkshow over de state of the arts. Over China dus, in chinastad, op Kleurnet. Veel plezier met onze presentator Sonny.
Hey, 各位观众晚上好，我是 Kleurnet 的中文记者。那今天晚上呢，我们很有兴趣请到了北京著名的地基张友代先生做我们的节目的嘉宾。那我们现在呢就进行采访。Hi everybody, good evening. And today we have very pleasure get our guest Mr. Zhang Youdai from Beijing Music Station Studio as our guest. So we will have interview with him. 张先生，请问一下，你这是第一次来荷兰 ？Is it the first time come to Holland?
Yes.
Yes.
是的。
是的。What do you think about Holland? 你认为荷兰如何？
像家。
Oh, great. As home. 像家一样。那我们就转入正题。Now we talk about your professional job. I know as a DG you're working for this kind of job almost 10 years. So what can you tell us? How can you find difference during the 10 years, the changing in China? 因为呢，我们的贵宾张友代先生做 DG 呢，接近有10年的历史了。那在这10年当中呢，中国大陆的音乐也有转化。那么我们现在就请张先生谈一下，他在这10年当中如何在做这项工作的。谢谢。
虽然我做 DJ 有10年，但是实际上并没有那么老。我从10岁开始做 DJ。Anyway, I'm not so old, even I'm being DJ 10 years. And of course, China has changed a lot. It's a big change in these 10 years. And especially in the cultural and the music scene, it's a big develop. And so if you want to know how it's changed, you have to be there. And tonight I can bring a lot of music from China to show people. And
now I have a question to you. It is most Chinese people, which kind of music they do like?
They like, of course, like everywhere in the world, like pop music, popular music, but special in China, it's not very open, and we don't have that kind of a tradition, and like a rock and roll. It's a very young, very new things to come into China, and most of people like the ordinary people like Kenny G, like Hong Kong and Taiwan pop, like that, yeah.
And how many people like classical music in China? 多少位的听众比较更喜欢我们所讲的古典音乐？
一位，江泽民。
Who?
江泽民。
Oh, the president of China.
Yeah, so that means everybody loves classical music because he loves.
Oh, it's actually the people didn't have their own choice. Oh,
no, we have choice. That means 因为江泽民喜欢古典音乐，所以就在政府方面比较鼓励和支持古典音乐的发展。
那我想请问你一下，关于在国内所谓的文艺事业和政治到底之间有什么微妙的关系？
这个我们都知道，在中国从解放以来，文艺一直是为政治服务。但是在改革开放以后，这个关系开始产生变化。那更多的艺术家他们是在创作艺术，越来越远离政治。但是呢，实际上在外国，来看中国的艺术，还是带着这种政治的有色眼镜来看。比方说一些非官方的艺术家，他们就认为他们是和政治有关，就是不是怎么说，还是跟政治有关系。所以作为我来说，我还是希望大家抛开政治和这个文艺的关系，无论是国内的官方还是国外的一些媒体。
那作为一个艺术家，在国内所受的环境有没有政治的压力？
这个压力我想肯定有，可能会比在西方国家多一些，但是我觉得这样的压力，我不知道其他的艺术领域，但是就音乐的领域来说，看中国15年的新音乐的发展历史，是这种压力带来了人们对一种新的音乐的这种欲望。
那 actually, which kinds of song stars in China also popular? 比如说，在中国有什么样的欧美的流行音乐的明星在国内流行也是？
像 Michael Jackson 啊、Madonna Kenny G 啊、Whitney Houston 啊、Mariah Carey 啊，都是这种 pop star。对。
那你有没有听过荷兰的音乐 ？Did you never hear Holland's song？
实际上，在今年的夏天5月份的时候，有一个音乐节，有一些荷兰的音乐家，爵士的音乐家。吹萨克斯的我忘了他的名字，很有名的爵士音乐，因为我那时候不在北京，我在欧洲。另外我知道Candy Dulfer 像这样的一些荷兰的音乐家。
好，那我现在呢看到一份资料关于介绍您的，就是说您现在在北京呢有2台节目是您所做的，第一个呢是 Midnight Blues， 还有一个呢是叫对 New Rock Magazine。那有的听众作为北京的听众来讲，他们更喜欢哪一个？
他们更喜欢 New Rock Magazine， 因为里面放一些 rock and roll alternative music， 而且我介绍更多的中国的local music， 所以他们会喜欢这样的。尤其年轻人，他们可能更容易接受一些比较新的东西。但是 Midnight Blues 是比较传统的比较根源的jazz and blues。所以需要年龄稍微大一点，比方说从20岁到35岁之间。那 New Rock Magazine 可能有很多是10几岁的这样的年轻人来听。
Okay, what do you think the future in China about the music? 你认为在国内来讲，他们音乐的前途如何
？The big future in China. It's only because we just started, so we have long way to go. We don't know what's gonna happen in the future. Yeah.
应该讲说，张先生是说，在国内呢，应该是有很大的机会，因为他们刚刚开始，所以说有很多的路可以走，那走到下面。And so in the future, so what do you prefer you do more part with your music？ 在未来的节目当中，你喜欢更多做哪一些侧重？
I more like play more local music, because it's good to support local musicians. And yeah, I hope in the future more good music happening in China. Yeah.
他更选择倾向于当地的音乐和当地的作曲家，因为这个样呢可以更好的支持和鼓励地产的作曲和音乐走向新的水准。Can you tell us about the local music stars like, for example, you know?
Yeah.
可不可以介绍一下，就是我们在国内比较出名的歌星和作曲家
？There's one rock singer, or we call it rock star. His name is Cui Jian, and he's almost the first musician to play rock music in China, and he's a very big influence to the young generation. And even me, I like his music. I like his music very much.
这最出名的一个呢，就是摇滚的在国内的开创者崔健先生。那他呢是很多年轻人都非常喜欢他的，包括我们的第7张友代先生也是非常欣赏和崇拜。
谈不上崇拜。Anyway, tonight I bring a musician with me. He actually is the traditional Chinese instrument zhijier player. He also played in Cui Jian's band before, and he, writing some songs with Cui Jian, like 雪地上撒点野、假行僧, and now he's doing his solo career, and he released his first album, solo album, 5 years ago, and this time he came with me, and we're gonna doing something very special. And be honest, we never doing that before, so it's gonna something very, very different happening tonight.
Okay, we wish you tonight a very successful. 我们呢就祝愿张友代先生和他的节目今天晚上非常成功。谢谢 ，Thank you very much.
Thank you. Hope to see you again.
Ja, dan gaan we nu dus luisteren naar die discussie over de state of the art in China. Onder leiding van Michiel van Crevel. Hij is hoogleraar Chinese totale letterkunde. En met mensen zoals Zhang Yudai, Helen Pao en Hu Zhijier. Videokunstenaars, dichters uit China.
His name is Zhang Yudai and her name is Helen Pao. And we'll be talking about the state of the art in Chinese contemporary culture, Chinese contemporary art, insofar as that is possible in the limited time that we have tonight. What we'll be doing is, I'll give a very brief introduction about a couple of topics that I think might be of relevance to what we want to be talking about tonight. And afterwards, there'll be plenty of opportunities for anybody to latch onto any one of those issues and bring us his or her views, provocations, questions, comments, and the rest of it, performances perhaps. In the middle, we will descend from the stage, halfway through the show, that is, and technology has made it possible for us to then, in the middle of the show, see some of the work of zhijier and Ellen Bao from a CD-ROM of an exhibition called Food for Thought, which will be opening tomorrow in Eindhoven. Afterwards, if we're still there, we'll get back on stage and continue to talk. And then there might also be some room for looking at poetry, very briefly, for which we won't need a screen nor any technology. Before I start, I should also say that toward the end of our talk show, our discussion, Zhang Yudai will have to leave a bit earlier than the rest of us, about 15 minutes early, because we'll have to prepare the setup for his China dance party, which will be the event that I'm sure all of you actually came to witness, and then you have to sit through this talk show. Sorry about that, but there's just no other way about it. Right. A few things that I'd like to start out with. One is that there's a really good phrase that I heard last night in The Hague at another show, and that is that, would everybody please switch off their mobile phones, or we'll come and do it for you. So please make sure that that doesn't happen, unless it's a performance, of course. Second point is that of language. I'll be speaking English, so will everybody else. If there is a problem, however, we have at our disposal Mandarin, Dutch, and I'm sure that we'll find ways to communicate if there is any problem for anybody to speak English. Please say so, and there'll be translation immediately and at no extra charge. That'll be all as far as the arrangements is concerned. There's a few things I wanted to say before sort of taking off on some of the bigger issues confronting us in any serious discussion of of contemporary Chinese culture. One is, I don't know what China is. There's many Chinas. There is a thing called Greater China. It's very fashionable to talk about Greater China, has been for a few years. China is in Taiwan, China is in Hong Kong, Xianggang. China is on the Chinese mainland, the People's Republic of China. It's in the Republic of China. It's also perhaps in Chinese communities in Singapore, Malaysia, Amsterdam, and I'm sure we could think of a few more. Now, if we look at modern art and contemporary art and culture in China, if we look at the 20th century, then sort of midway through that century is an interesting point of departure, because then the political notions of where China was and what China was went through quite a bit of turbulent change, and this resulted in us, being in the luxurious positions of having all these Chinas to talk about. There is, for example, like I said, there is a China in Taiwan, there is one in Hong Kong, and there's one on the Chinese mainland and beyond as well. But those three are important Chinas. They have very different artistic disciplines and developments. And in each of those histories, the history of Taiwan, the history of Hong Kong, and the history of the Chinese mainland, we could point to certain moments in Chinese artistic history that would have been of crucial importance when we look back. On the Chinese mainland, for example, that would have been the year 1978, when Deng Xiaoping, the late Deng Xiaoping, came to power, and well, that was an end to the Cultural Revolution, an end to the Maoist regime in China. And if we talk about contemporary Chinese culture in the People's Republic, we usually refer to the last 20 years or so. In Taiwan, for example, a very important year would have been that of 1987, the lifting of martial law, when the government in Taiwan started to be much less worried about artistic freedom than it had been before. Anyway, we can think of a few more important and crucial places and times like that. One thing we do know is that what we're going to be talking about tonight is the contemporary thing. We're going to be talking about Chinese art and culture now and perhaps yesterday, the day before yesterday, but absolutely not last week or the week before that. It's going to be about what's happening now. This is a show taking place in Amsterdam. Now, if I was going to say we, but that is has become a very difficult word to use. Let's say if people in Amsterdam going to a show about China look at China, we probably should also wonder what they're really looking at and what they're doing in looking at China. Do they think that they're looking at take a deep breath, the other? Do they look at the Orient, perhaps? Are they looking for exotic chinoiserie, even today? Is it a political gaze with which we look at China? Do we really want to see Chinese art and culture as documentary notions on Chinese politics and society? That's possible. And then there are those who make this into their specialty, this China watching, this looking at China, Chinese culture in the broader sense of the word. I'm one of them. We're called sinologists. In Leiden, most of them center around, in Holland, most of them center around Leiden at the university there. What do the sinologists do? Well, they look at China, this and that aspect of China, languages and cultures, all of that, and they might be more inclined than an average audience of a talk show in Amsterdam one Saturday night to look at Chinese art and culture as reflections of Chinese society rather than artistic products in their own right. This is a possibility. I don't know whether a majority of the sinologists at the moment in power have committed that sin, but it's certainly possible. The people organizing this manifestation, the people of Borneo Co and the Tropen Museum, are, as far as I know, for the most part not sinologists, so they might not have approached it from that angle. And I would like to know and find out later on tonight whether you have come for art or for China. Both are fine, perhaps a blend is possible, but that would be an interesting question, and we don't have to be worried about talking about difficult and big issues like that, like what is Chineseness in art, and where is the art in Chinese art, and what do we want to know about that. Those are just a few of the things I'd like to say by way of introduction. Now I've got a full page here of issues, and it's definitely going to be way too much for an hour and a half or even an hour and 15 minutes. What I'd like to do is perhaps provide some points of departure, ask some questions and see what the people here have to tell us in response to that. If you want to interrupt, intervene, ask questions and all of that, please feel free to do so, but you can rest assured that certainly toward the end of the talk show there'll be some space, some time reserved for that. And let's just take it from there. One thing I'd like to begin with in talking to our guests tonight is that as a student of Chinese culture, I've been a student of Chinese culture for some time now. What has always struck me is that there is a wealth of categories, a wealth of cultures, if we believe both the learned books and the hip newspapers written about that. There is, for example, avant-garde cultures, 先锋文化. There is underground cultures, 地下文化. There is non-official cultures, 非官方文化. There is non-mainstream cultures, 非主流文化. There is 边缘文化, fringe cultures. There is subcultures, 亚文化. And then there is 下层文化. Well, that's a little bit like a subculture too. And I forgot the most important one, perhaps 反文化, counterculture. Okay? Now all of these cultures are hip, right? And then there is, of course, there is mainstream culture, 主流文化. There is official culture, 官方文化. There is 上层文化, that's upper culture. As an antonym to the avant-garde, we could have perhaps 落后文化吧，不是先锋派就是落后派吧。You know, 保守派, thank you, conservative culture. Then there is, there could be central culture, like as opposed to 边缘 culture, it could be 中心文化. And those are not hip, right? Unhip?
对不起，我没文化。
All right. Okay. Can you do that in English? Can you do that in English?
It's just South culture and North culture.
Okay, South culture and North culture. Which one is hip?
Which one is what?
Which one is hip? Cool. 流行.
South.
South. Okay. Where are you from? Where are you from?
I'm from South.
Oh, really? I was going to ask Zhang Youdai, who incidentally is the one of the makers of the non-verbal introduction to this night that you just saw, that thing called 清醒 sober, that band from Beijing. So that's Zhang Youdai. I was going to ask you to say what you just said, 我没有文化, in English.
I have no culture.
You have no culture. You are an uncultured person.
Uncultured, yeah.
An uncultured person, okay. But could you perhaps say something about these endless categories of all these cultures in when we talk about Chinese
Yeah,
culture?
well, I really,在中国, in China, everybody is really hip to say culture, this word. We say the food is 饮食文化, or some food culture, and
Food culture, yeah.
yeah, food culture, and everything is related with culture. But actually, it's not non-cultural at all. And I really hate that to see this put one thing into a, make it hip only for a catalog. Just make something happening. That's,
Yeah, okay.
that's
So
simple.
you create a hype. So you call something a culture and then it's hip. Like a lifestyle.
Yeah.
Right, but are you serious when you say that there is no culture in China? What are you doing here then?
If you really want put me into that kind, one of the label of the culture, I would say I'm not one of them.
Okay, so you don't want to be pigeonholed. Okay, fine, yeah. Okay, 没有文化, right, no culture. I think there is certainly a point there. I mean, what you're saying is that, the image is very good. I mean, create something as a culture, as a hype for the catalogs. And when you say catalogs, what sort of catalogs do you mean?
Catalog means a label.
Like a label.
So we try to put into a label.
So once it has a name,
标签儿，我们说标签儿，
标签儿，
来给你一个标签儿，
给你一个标签儿，
give you a label.
yeah. So once it has a label, it has a name, and you can sell it, right? Then you can sell it.
Yeah, I can create my own label.
You can create your own label, and then you can sell it. Okay. But Qiu Zhijie, if I may take it from there and say, well, once it has a label, it's marketable. Yeah, we can market it, we can sell it, we can. Is that important? Do you think that may explain some of those 文化 and 派 and 流潮 or something?
Yes, but you know now anything could be a label, even 没有文化 could be a label.
Yeah.
I don't think his idea. I think his idea is one kind of anti-culture.
Yeah. Okay. So 没有文化是一种反文化.
No,
To have no culture is a kind of counterculture.
我不反对文化，我不反对任何事情。
Okay. Zhang Youdai just said that he is not opposed to culture. He is not opposed, in fact, to anything. All right. But this idea of marketing, Zhijie, I'm asking you the question because I just read a book that came up earlier at an earlier session of this manifestation, Chinese Characters, by Jeremy Bamei, called In the Red. It is a book that, as its subtitle has, on contemporary Chinese culture. And the bottom line, right, a metaphor from finance, the bottom line of that book is that Chinese culture is in the red, in the sense that it owes us something, it owes money. And the whole book is about marketing Chinese art. And the book reaches a very cynical conclusion about Chinese art in the 1990s, basically saying that the bottom line of Chinese art in the 1990s is indeed the bottom line from finance. How do I sell it? How do I make as much money as possible? That is, according to Jeremy Bamei, known in Chinese as Bai Jiming, the story of Chinese art in the 1990s. What do you think?
I think because in China it is impossible to make what do you mean, avant-garde culture to become business, and to make money. It's no market, but the market is in the West now, and I think that's the biggest problem of China's culture now.
Yeah, so you're saying that avant-garde market art, avant-garde art in China really has no market, that where you sell your product as a true avant-garde, artist is abroad. And there are, in fact, people who say that, well, the more trouble you are in inside China, and then we mean things like harassment by the government, harassment by the censors, the closing of exhibitions, we've seen it all before, it has been going on for a long time. The more trouble you are in inside China, the better that is for your image outside China. So there's a very interesting relationship here. You have to make sure that you come across as very dissident, 是不同政见者, and so on and so on. And then the foreign observers will look at you and say, hey, this is an interesting artist, this is somebody who does something else that the government does, and therefore he or she is interesting, and we're going to buy their paintings and make them rich. Is that how it works?
I think most of the Chinese artists, they know nothing about political. But sometimes people would like to regard them as politicians. And that's, I think it's up to the need of the audience, nothing to do with the artists themselves.
Okay. Ella.
Yeah, because I'm coming from Hong Kong. To a certain extent, I'm a little bit outsider. I'm a little bit off China. But your
fringe culture. You may be fringe culture.
No. I'm okay. If you want that label, yeah, we have Fringe Festival in Hong Kong, but they have changed their name last year to the City Festival, so we are not Fringe anymore. Anyway, my impression about China, well, I think for a very long time I have been, or maybe Hong Kong has been cut off from China for a long time, and. Well, my impression may not be that updated, but what you have said is probably a very common understanding among Hong Kong artists about Chinese artists. And of course, when we know, like now we have chance to talk person to person, and this sort of like myth or this sort of strategy they are using maybe is not that appropriate. But this kind of saying is quite popular, I'm sure. And I
mean the things like the more trouble you're in inside China, the better that is for your market value outside China.
Well, because I really saw someone who is doing that.
You've actually seen it alive, yeah. Right. So there is some truth to it.
Well, I think so. Yeah. Especially before, like before 90s.
Before the 90s, okay. Yeah, Zhang Zhao.
I think that I think the West is also partly responsible for that, because it's always looking at trying to make exotic what is different, So they often make artists sensational through the negative points there. It's politics.
So it's both of those things, like as zhijier said, it's in the eyes of the audience, perhaps beauty and many other things in the eye of the beholder, saying, look, there is a Chinese artist. First of all, they're Chinese, so they're interesting, they're exotic. And secondly, they're really cool because they live under a dictatorship. So then you got to be good. I'm sure that a lot of those things influenced certainly scholarship also on China, especially in the 1980s. Perhaps for the benefit of the audience, I might add a few words here. Into the 1970s, the Chinese mainland was basically a closed society, inaccessible to foreigners. So it's only been in recent decades that even the sinologists have started to understand what is really going on. Ellen, if I may come back to you there, you said that this thing, your remark really holds for the 1990s. How is the 1990s different from, say, the 1980s?
Well, I think, it's very from my personal point of view. Before 90s, I feel that there is a lot of artists who want to get out from China, and there is really no channels for them to do so. And the only way that they can do so is to make themselves well known, and then get official invitation, and then they can travel outside China. But I think after the 90s, when they are more open compared to the 80s, then artists can travel comparatively quite easy. But it's not really easy, I know, it's still quite difficult, but comparatively it's quite easy, and they don't have to make that choice in order to travel, in order to get the attraction. Yeah. So that's why. Right, yeah. And within the Chinese artistic community, and this is a question I'd like to put to either Zhang Youdai or to Qiu Zhijier, because both of you live in China, even though you're here tonight. What does this sort of impression do to people who remain in China? So what I'm saying is, if inside China people know that leaving China may be a way of making a lot of money and so on, how do the artists, writers and artists and people like yourselves who live in China look at the outsiders, look at the ones who have left China?
His question is asking for artists.
Okay. So
that's right.
Maybe we have to still talking about the difference between 80s and 90s. It's really quite different for me. Of course, only in these 2 decades we can talking about it's better than art. Before that, the art is surveyed for the political purpose, and then maybe in the end of the 70s, and Chinese contemporary artists, they began to they asked for the rights to express themselves. So maybe I think from the end of 70s, maybe in the middle of 80s, they fight for that. They against something, they have something to against too. They against officer culture. So it's called socialist realism.
Yeah, socialist realism, right.
Also against Chinese tradition.
Okay, and Chinese tradition?
Yeah, so it's very radical. It's very radical. But in the 90s, change is different. Okay. And maybe I think now change was more privatized, and
more what? Sorry.
Yeah, more
private.
Personal. Yeah.
Private, yeah, personal.
Personal.
Okay, more personal things.
And so in the beginning of the 90s, Chinese, and I can only talk about fine arts. Chinese contemporary art, they begin to get notice from the Western world.
From the West, yeah.
Yeah, so sometimes it becomes a focus. But in the beginning, the first Western people to come to China and interested in Chinese art, not the people from the art world, but some maybe newspaper reporter, and some reporter live in Beijing, some officer in embassy in Beijing. So maybe they first noticed the something in Chinese art, something political.
Yeah.
They're most interested in political.
I think this is one of the reasons. I mean, these people influenced the forming of opinions about Chinese art and literature, and these people were often, well, journalists, as you say, or sinologists who happened to have a bit of an interest in something else besides China, say art, and then found out about that and would highlight the political and the historical background simply because they had been trained to do that. You're not going to get away without answering a few questions here.
Okay.
So let's talk a bit more about this issue of people leaving China, because there is a veritable Chinese diaspora in intellectual and cultural circles. There's an enormous number of Chinese artists who have left China and stayed away for shorter or longer periods of time. Now, if I'm not mistaken, so correct me if I'm wrong, but this doesn't really hold for rock music or any other kind of modern, contemporary. Is that true? I mean, are there any Chinese musicians who have left China to start a musical career outside China?
First of all, I want to say, before I say I have no culture, I'm non-cultural, because I'm none of that culture. But one culture I belong is youth culture.
Youth culture?
Yes.
Okay.
And
青年文化, yeah.
And that, I think, is a more powerful culture.
Okay.
Anytime, anywhere, and that's more international. And that's one thing, especially in music, and can understanding it's youth culture and no boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's for a Chinese, because I started doing being a radio DJ 10 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And when I start doing that, because there's no one person in the media to introduce a different kind of music from the world to the Chinese audience. And I feel I got a mission from the God, to bring every week 1 hour to play all the good music to people. And since I've been, got such a this time, got a chance to going abroad and meeting more people, especially to young people. And I find people in West to knowing about the modern China very little.
All right.
Even the Chinese people very easy to understand. To even it's only 1 hour, 1 week to listen to my show,
Mm-hmm.
and they still can get chance to listen to, right? But I don't think it's any chance here the young people can listen to the Chinese music. For your question is it's a Chinese musician
Mm-hmm.
going abroad.
Yeah, I was just wondering, because I know there's poets and painters who leave China and build up successful careers outside China. Has that happened to musicians?
Before, no,
Yeah.
not because that's the ground in China, and you can make music there, and
That's the what in China?
especially for rock music.
Yeah.
Because rock music, the lyric is very important. Lyrics.
Okay.
And that for understanding, and it's only for Chinese people to understanding the lyrics.
Mm.
And from my point of view, since 90s, I'm more into the dance music, electronic music, and that's I think it's the DJ culture or the electronic music.
Mm.
It's more easy to, or we can call it real youth culture. That's what I mean.
No boundaries.
Yeah, no boundaries.
Yeah.
And you don't have to understand lyrics.
Yeah.
And I'm part of the new generation. Don't need that kind of lyrics. That thing. So
New generation. Yeah.
yes, new generation Y. I'm not generation Y, but I'm working on.
Yeah.
that.
Can I just interrupt you and ask you something? Because I mean, for me, as somebody, I was born and bred in Holland. And what you just said about the lyrics being very important and the comprehensibility of the lyrics being important is interesting to me, because I know that I'm not the only Dutch kid that grew up listening to foreign rock bands who usually sang in English and being able to imitate what they were singing. I didn't have a clue, right? Money can't buy me love, and I didn't know what that was, but I mean, the music sounded good, and then 10 years later I learned that it meant money can't buy me love. Is that any different in China?
I think it's it's a language. It's maybe English is the perfect language for singing.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, I have something to say.
Yeah, yeah.
Well,
Cantonese.
yeah, Cantonese pop is very popular.
Yeah.
But since I think
In what language is that?
Cantonese.
Cantonese, so one of the many.
Well,
Chinese languages,
Hong
yeah.
Kong people speak Cantonese only.
Yeah.
I mean, no, not only, but most of them.
I speak a lot of Cantonese. A lot of Cantonese.
A little bit Mandarin. And Cantonese pop in Hong Kong start from the 60s. And of course they earn money, and then gradually they become big business. But they found that there is a Taiwan market, and there's a bigger market in China. Billions of people dying for music, pop music. So now what the Cantonese pop artists will do, they will record one Cantonese pop album, and then sing in Cantonese, and another album in Mandarin.
Right.
I mean, they have different covers, but the song is the same song, and the language is Chinese, but it's in different dialects.
Right.
The market in China for music is really great. I think it's maybe more than the English population. I don't know if you add up the population in China, and if all of them have money to buy pop music, then it will be a great market.
Yeah.
But it's not happening now,
Right.
because
Well,
they
this,
don't have that money.
This is the
Right.
famous story about doing business in China.
Right now, if you want to get a business international-wise,
Yeah.
as Zhang
Right.
said, international-wise, it's the English market.
Yeah.
Like a Denmark music band will sing in English,
Right.
or
Yeah, okay.
foreign
Yeah,
music
good
band
point.
will sing in English. It's the same strategy to be part of the international music scene, because it's all billboards and Virgin and HMV.
Okay. Well,
thing is-
let's this thing on language. We have somebody here, one of the four people here, whose art consists of words and words only. Zhang. So how does that feel to be a Chinese poet? And then that probably means that very few people outside China can read your stuff. I mean, how do you deal with that? How do Chinese poets deal with that?
You know, I have a very different feeling as I hear they talk about their own arts and discipline. It's basically
Microphone.
It's basically they're talking about success. I think poets are talking about failures.
All right. Poets talk about failure. So can you tell us about your failures?
So the point of departure is very different. Music and all this pop art just want to attract more people.
Right.
It's very good, but you can never think about that you can attract people with poetry.
Can I just ask you something? Would you like to have many readers?
Sure.
Okay.
Sure, but the way you write, and the way you define poetry, it just does the kind of hermetism that comes automatically with writing. Just refuses this illusion that you're going to have a lot of people listening to you. So you're basically someone who's doomed to failure.
Right, so you're also making quite a statement about poetry here, because you're talking about hermeticism. This is don't take it personally, this is a bad translation of a popular word in Chinese poetry history, menglong, which means misty, obscure, something that you can't, really see very well. And then you're also assuming that anybody writing poetry will be writing hermetic poetry. Is that...
No, that's not what that was not what I said. I mean, if you start to write poetry, a lot of people start to think automatically about culture. It's poetry is kind of elitism.
Elitism, okay.
Yeah. If people try to connect poetry to kind of modernism and things like that, so you have a very different point of departure. And I think poetry is also, just like music, is also a longing after dialogue, after listening, that people are trying to listen to you.
Can I ask you to read a short poem?
Oh, sure.
Yeah?
I have to go down and get that.
You got to go down and get your book. Yeah, all right. Okay, I'll get it. Sorry for the interruption. This is badly prepared. We'll be listening to the poem in Chinese first, and then in Dutch.
Listen to the words of doomed failure.
Listen to the words of failure. Yeah, right. This is a poem from 1992, right?
Yes.
Okay.
I wrote that in Germany,
In Germany.
夜半的面包。10月已过，我并没有发疯。窗外的迷雾婴儿般滚动，我一生等待的唯一结果未露端倪。如果我是寂静，那么隔着外套，面包也会来吃我。是谁派遣了这面包？那少年是我，把自行车颠倒在地。当他的手死命地摇转脚蹬，我便大吃那飞轮如水的肌肉。是谁派遣了灾难，派遣了辩证法？事物鸡零狗碎的上空，死人的眼睛含满棉花。我会吃自己，如果我是沉默。
Brood om middernacht. Oktober is voorbij en ik ben niet gek geworden. Buiten mijn raam rolt de nevel zich om als een zuigeling. Van die ene uitkomst waarop ik mijn leven lang al wacht, nog geen spoor. Ook al ben ik stilte, dan nog komt het brood dwars door mijn overjas mij opeten. Wie heeft dit brood gestuurd? Die jongen ben ik, toen hij zijn fiets op zijn kop zette. En terwijl zijn hand voor zijn leven aan de trappers draait, vreet ik me vol aan zijn vliegwielige spieren als water. Wie heeft die ram gestuurd en de dialectiek? In een kippenveren, hondenharen hemel van versnippering zijn de ogen der doden gevuld met katoen. Ik zal mijzelf opeten, ook al ben ik zwijgen.
Tot zover de discussie over de state of the art in China in het Tropenmuseum. Dit was Chinastad.